UFC 294 is happening this weekend, and it's a pretty good card. A lot of fights have fallen through. 3 of the 5 main card fights have changed in the past 10 days. Islam Makhachev originally was supposed to fight Charles Oliveira, but Charles pulled out with an injury, and now we got Islam versus Volk, which is still a good fight, but Islam versus Charles was my most anticipated fight of last year, and it's one of my most anticipated fights of this year, and I've been waiting for this rematch for a long time. But Islam versus Volk is a good replacement, and then Paulo Costa pulled out against Khamzat Chimaev, and Kamaru Usman stepped in on 10 days notice. And then Ikram was supposed to fight Nasruddin Imavov, and instead we got him versus Warlley Alves. Very disappointed with this one. Ikram versus Imavov was a fight I was really looking forward to, and no offense to Alves, but this just isn't even close to as good of a fight. But we still got a pretty good card, one of the best cards of the year so far for sure. We obviously got the champion versus champion fight in the main event, Islam versus Volk. That's a great fight. Usman's going to be facing Khamzat. Ankalaev makes his return after like a year layoff. Ikram Aliskerov, one of my favorite up-and-coming prospects, is on the card. Saeed's on the card, and he's got a pretty tough fight in front of him. Makhachev is on the card, and he's facing Tim Elliott. Definitely like Makhachev in that fight against an aging Tim Elliott. Trevor Peek's on the card, always fun watching him. Nathaniel Wood's on the card, one of my favorite fighters to watch. Definitely like him against Mohamed Naimov. Victoria Dudakova, I think is how you say her name, is one of my favorite up-and-coming female prospects. She's from Russia, and she has future champion potential for sure. Bruno Silva's on the card. Always love watching him, but he's got a very tough fight in front of him. My locks of the card, I'm going to go with Ikram, Mohamed Makhachev, and Nathaniel Wood. And then my underdogs of the card, I definitely like Volkanovski as a plus 235 underdog. And then because he's got the power and can make anything happen in the striking department, I also like Bruno Silva as an underdog. But let's start off with Ikram Aliskerov versus Warlley Alves. Ikram Aliskerov is one of my favorite up-and-coming middleweight prospects, and in a division that's pretty shallow like the middleweight division. He's definitely a guy that I see being a future contender, and honestly, he does have future champion potential. He's only 30, he's still 4-ish years out of his prime, and he's already this good. I mean, this guy in his second UFC fight was matched up against Paulo Costa, who I think was ranked number 5 at that time. He is 14-1 from Dagestan, which is where Khabib and Islam and Umar and Usman and all those guys are from. He is a combat sambo world champion, and his only loss is to Khamzat Chimaev a few years back. As I said before, Ikram was supposed to fight Nasruddin Imavov, and that would have been a much tougher, much more competitive fight. But on 10 days notice, it's really hard to find a replacement, especially against Ikram, a guy not a lot of people want to fight. But this is pretty much a layup for him. He should win this fight pretty easily. He's a combat sambo world champion. He's got the wrestling and overall grappling advantage for sure, and then he's got the striking advantage as well. He's got a great jab that's going to land on Warlley Alves all day, and then a decent right hand with a lot of power behind it. His overall striking defense isn't too great. He doesn't move his head very well. He moves in a straight line. He only backsteps away, and that's how he kept getting caught with that right hook. He doesn't circle away. He doesn't use lateral movement. His footwork isn't great, but offensively, he's got a lot of power in his right hand. He's got a very good jab, and then we don't even need to talk about the wrestling. This guy stopped all of Khamzat Chimaev's takedowns. He has very good wrestling and amazing submission skills. His only weakness, as I said, is his striking defense is pretty terrible. That's actually how he lost to Khamzat, because despite being able to defend all of Khamzat's takedowns, his striking defense wasn't good enough, and Khamzat was able to find a knockout with an uppercut, and that's Warlley Alves' best chance. He has a lot of power in his hands. He's a pretty decent striker overall, and if he can time as Ikram moves into range with a right uppercut or a right hook over Ikram's jab, he can definitely catch Ikram as he moves into his right hand, knocking him out. That is Ikram's only loss, is that knockout to Khamzat. Alves does not have very good takedown defense or submission defense. He's been submitted in quite a few of his last fights, and that's another thing. He's taking this fight on 10 days notice with no training camp, traveling from Brazil to the Middle East. His past 2 fights have been at welterweight, which means he's coming up a division, and I believe he's also been finished in his last 2 fights. His only real chance is to catch Ikram as he moves in with that right hand, either an uppercut or a hook, or potentially look for a lead left hook. We don't know if Ikram's vulnerable to that. But in the end, I'm going to go with Ikram by a submission. He could also knock him out. I definitely don't see this fight going the distance. Next, we're going to go to Magomed Ankalaev versus Johnny Walker. Big fight here in the light heavyweight division. Whoever wins this fight might get a title shot next. Ankalaev is coming off a tie to Jan Blachowicz for the light heavyweight championship that a lot of people, including myself, thought he won, whereas Johnny Walker is coming off a good win against Anthony Smith a few months back. On the feet, Johnny Walker definitely has the advantage. Ankalaev is pretty sloppy with his striking. He overextends on a lot of his punches, has a lot of power, but defensively isn't too great. He's got a big weakness to the leg kicks. He actually almost got finished by leg kicks in the Jan Blachowicz fight. And Johnny Walker has very good kicks. He can definitely go to that leg kick all day. And if Ankalaev tries to switch stances to avoid the outside leg kick, then that opens up the head kicks upstairs or the body kicks. Ankalaev, as I said, has a lot of power and a really good jab, but against Johnny Walker, who has a 7-inch reach advantage here, it's going to be hard to out-jab him, and Johnny does have a very good jab. He's very good at controlling distance, and as Ankalaev blitzes forward with a big right hand and leaves his chin exposed, Johnny Walker could step back and counter him. But where this fight gets completely flipped upside down is if Magomed is able to take this fight to the ground. Johnny Walker has okay takedown defense. He was able to defend Anthony Smith's takedowns pretty well, but Anthony Smith is not a very good wrestler, and Ankalaev is the best wrestler in the light heavyweight division. Now, as Ankalaev shoots in from a distance, it can be quite dangerous because he's going to be so far out, and if Johnny Walker could time an uppercut or a knee or something, he could absolutely catch Ankalaev and possibly knock him out there. However, he is not defending Ankalaev's takedowns, and he's definitely not getting up from the bottom. So if Ankalaev is just able to repeatedly take him down, then I see Ankalaev winning this fight pretty handily, but on the feet, it could be dicey. Johnny Walker is a little chinny and his striking defense isn't great, but Ankalaev has to cover so much distance and he leaves himself exposed far too much. It's a dangerous game to play on the feet with Johnny Walker, but who do I see winning this? I think Johnny Walker definitely has a better chance than what the odds say, but in the end, I'm going to go with Ankalaev by a decision. I think he'll be able to take Johnny Walker's punches as he enters range. Ankalaev has a great chin, and he could possibly line up his own right hand and knock Johnny Walker out. That's how Jamal Hill was able to knock out Johnny Walker. But in the end, I think Ankalaev's going to be able to take Johnny Walker down with ease round after round, and he might have a hard time submitting him. I don't actually see him submitting Johnny Walker, but I think he'll just be able to out-wrestle him and ride out the rounds, landing ground and pound. It is a dangerous fight for Ankalaev, but in the end, I'm definitely going to have to go with him. Now we go on to the co-main event, Khamzat Chimaev versus Kamaru Usman. Khamzat was originally supposed to fight Paulo Costa, but Costa pulled out with a staph infection, and Kamaru Usman decided to step up on 10 days notice, move up a weight class to a weight class he's never fought at before, and face Khamzat Chimaev. Now, what are Usman's strengths? It's wrestling and it's boxing. He's got amazing wrestling, great takedown defense, and then on the feet, he's got a really good jab, a really good cross. His jab is good out of both stances. He's got a lot of power in his jab and his backhand. He finished Gilbert Burns, not Gilbert Burns, out with his jab. And then he also knocked out Jorge Masvidal with the right hand. And his boxing defense has gotten a whole lot better since like the Tyron Woodley fight. Now, what is Khamzat good at? It's pressure, wrestling, and power. He's got a lot of power in his hands, not the most technical striker. And then he's got insane pressure. The pressure and pace he put on Kevin Holland was crazy. He's got amazing wrestling, pretty good submissions, and a granite chin. On the feet, this fight is actually pretty even, I would say. Khamzat doesn't have the best striking defense. He doesn't move his head at all, and that's how Gilbert Burns was able to repeatedly catch him. He keeps his hands pretty wide, which is perfect for Usman's right straight and his jab. On the feet, those straight punches are always going to be there. He can jab. He can throw a 1-2 down the pipe. He can double up on the jab, but what he can't do is throw winging overhands that he normally likes to throw, because Khamzat also has a very good jab. And as Usman throws those winging overhands, he leaves his chin exposed, and Khamzat can throw his jab right down the pipe. Now, what does Usman really struggle with? It's people who have good kicks. We saw in that third Leon Edwards fight that Leon was pretty much able to win just by kicking Usman's legs and body from a distance. Now, Khamzat doesn't have the best kicks. He has pretty good low kicks with a lot of power behind him, and that's something he should use a lot. He should constantly throw leg kicks from range, and then as Usman tries to dart in, counter him with an uppercut or a right hand of his own. His striking as a whole isn't amazing. He often throws weird looping punches. He'll throw weird uppercuts and hooks. And that's another thing. Khamzat is coming off of a massive layoff, and we don't know how that could affect him. Now, can Khamzat take Usman to the ground? That's the big question, because if Khamzat is able to take Usman to the ground, Usman doesn't have much for him. Usman does not have very good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and if Khamzat's able to take him to the ground, Usman's going to immediately look to turtle, and as he turtles, Khamzat can immediately look for the darce. That's his favorite submission. Or he could transition to the back and choke Usman out there. That's actually how Leon Edwards was able to take Usman's back in their second fight, because as he took him down, Usman just gave it up immediately in an attempt to get up and sort of power his way up instead of technically escaping from the takedown. Now, Khamzat has a lot better submissions than Leon Edwards, and if Usman does that against Khamzat, he's gonna get choked out. But can Khamzat get Usman to the ground is the big question. Khamzat has very good wrestling, and he's super relentless with his takedowns, but Usman has very good takedown defense. He's only been taken down twice, once against Colby and once against Leon. Usman's key to victory here is to defend the initial shot in the center of the cage. Khamzat likes to shoot in the middle and then avoid the fence. He can't get backed up against the fence, because that's where Khamzat's going to have the easiest time taking him down. If they end up against the fence, Khamzat's going to have a lot easier of a time taking Usman down with either a trip or a throw or a double leg against the cage. And then on the feet, Usman has to keep his defense tight and then constantly throw that jab. And then as Khamzat walks forward, backstep and throw that right cross right down the center line. And because Khamzat doesn't move his head, that right hand is going to be there and then circle away from the cage. Khamzat's key to victory, on the other hand, is pretty simple. Take Usman down and submit him. The hard part is taking Usman down. I said before, against the cage is his best bet. He's got to pressure Usman behind his jab to get against the fence, shoot for the double leg, and then as Usman tries to turtle to get up, either look for a darce or transition to the back and submit him with a rear naked choke. But who do I see winning this fight in the end? Now, this might surprise a lot of people, but if they were both in their primes, for example, if this was the Kamaru Usman that fought Tyron Woodley or Colby Covington the first time, I'd actually lean Usman pretty heavily, because I think he'd be able to defend the takedowns and then on the feet be able to constantly land that jab, and then as Khamzat walks into range, throw that right hand, and I think he could actually knock out Khamzat. However, this isn't prime Usman. His knees are terrible. Did you know that? It almost seems like Joe Rogan always mentions that he has to walk up the stairs backwards and has to walk on the grass because he can't walk on pavement. And because his knees are terrible, he's going to have a much harder time defending the takedowns. Takedowns start with the feet, and then he's also going to have a hard time moving away and circling away. He also took this fight on super short notice. He only has 10 days to prepare, fly halfway across the world to Abu Dhabi with pretty much no training camp, whereas Khamzat's been in training camp for months now. So in the end, I'm gonna go with Khamzat by a second round submission. I actually think Usman might win the first round. I think he'll defend some of the early takedowns and have some success on the feet, but I see Khamzat eventually being able to take this fight to the ground, whether that's with a double leg against the cage or a trip or throw, or potentially he drops Usman because Usman's chin might not be the same after that Leon Edwards knockout. He's also getting up there in age. He's like 37. So I could see him dropping Usman, and then as Usman tries to scramble, catching on to some sort of submission like a Darce. That's actually the submission I see Khamzat finishing Usman with, is that Darce choke. Now moving on to the main event of the evening, Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski 2, the rematch we've all been waiting for. A lot of people thought Volkanovski won that first fight, but in the end the judges gave Islam the decision, and Volkanovski's looking for revenge. This is the only guy that has beat him in the UFC, and he's once again going for that champ status, and if he gets it, that will be insane. But there's a lot going against Volkanovski. The 10-day notice to fight Islam, little training camp. He's coming off of an elbow injury that he just had surgery for a few months back, and apparently he only fully recovered a few weeks ago. He has to go into enemy territory halfway across the world and fight a guy he has already lost to once. Islam, on the other hand, is fighting at home and has 36 hours to rehydrate. That's a huge deal. Against Volk the first time, he only had 24 hours. Now he's got 12 more, which is going to make him bigger on fight night. It's going to make him stronger on fight night. His chin's going to be better. He's going to be able to take a punch much better. His cardio is going to be better. So everything's going against Volkanovski here. Volkanovski should not win this fight, but he always seems to find a way. In that first Islam fight, everyone counted him out. No one thought he would win, and he went out there and almost beat, and in some people's eyes did beat Islam. He is training with Craig Jones, the best Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner on the planet. He has great striking, insane fight IQ, his ability to adjust on the fly. In that second Max Holloway fight, he was losing and then came back and won that fight because of adjustments he made. He's got very good wrestling, good takedown defense. He's super strong, but this is a tough one for him. On the feet, he should have the advantages against Islam, but we saw in the first fight, on the feet, it was pretty much even. I think that's partly because Volk underestimated Islam's striking in their first fight. Islam is deceptively quick with his punches. He's got a very fast left hand, pretty good footwork, very good head kicks, and in opposite stances, that head kick is going to be open for Islam to land. And that head kick is super fast with no telegraph. Islam does not telegraph his head kicks at all, and they have quite a bit of power to them too. Islam, as I said, also has a very good left hand with a lot of power behind his left hand. He's got a decent jab, good footwork. He's very defensive on the feet. Islam is much more of a defensive striker. He's got a pretty good guard with great head movement. His reaction time is super fast. Volk is overall the better striker. He's got very good leg kicks, but he has to watch the leg kicks because if Islam catches a leg kick and then throws that left hand, sort of like Brian Ortega did, Islam could drop him and knock him out, or drop him and then submit him, or Islam could catch the kick and then take him down, treetop him, or transition into a single leg, or push him back up against the fence and then trip him or throw him out against the cage. Volk also has a very good jab out of both stances. Volk and Islam can both switch stances. Volk can definitely switch stances better, and that'll give him different angles to attack on. Volk has very good footwork, a good chin, pretty good defense, a great jab, a great right hand with a lot of power in that right hand. He's one of the most technical strikers the UFC has ever seen. He is extremely fast. He is one of the fastest fighters in all of the UFC for sure. And he's pretty powerful as well. On the feet, the fight is fairly even. Volk should win on the feet. And that's Volk's game plan. Like it was in the first fight, keep it on the feet, defend the takedowns, constantly land leg kicks and jabs. And then as Islam tries to enter range, that's another thing. Islam is taller, but Volk has, I think, a 2-inch reach advantage. So as Islam tries to get around that reach, Volk can look for an uppercut or step to the outside of Islam's lead leg because they are in opposite stances and line up his own right hand. Islam can do the same thing. Islam can step to the outside as he moves into range, feint a takedown, and then land that left hook. And then when the roles are reversed, as Volk tries to enter into range, he can switch stances, which is what he did throughout most of the first fight. He would enter into range by switching to southpaw. Islam wouldn't notice, and then he'd line up that left hand. And because Volk probably isn't in as good a shape as he's been in past fights because of everything that's going on, the surgery, him coming off of only a 10-day training camp, he might not have the best cardio. So he could look to finish Islam early, which means he's probably looking for a knockout. He does have decent power. He did drop Islam in that first fight. So it is definitely possible he could catch Islam either on Islam's entry or an entry of his own. Islam's game plan is pretty simple. Take Volk to the ground, find a position, and possibly look for a submission. Volk is a hard guy to submit because of how much him and Craig Jones have drilled submission defense, and it's hard to take him to the ground. He's got very good takedown defense, and he's short, which gives Islam a ton of issues. It's much harder to shoot takedowns on a shorter fighter. He's also extremely strong. He has a very strong base. His legs are insanely big. And then as Islam takes him down, because Islam's definitely going to be able to take him down, Volkanovski can scramble and try and get up from the bottom. That's also something he's drilled a lot, getting up from the bottom of takedowns. But how do I see this fight playing out? On the feet, I think Volkanovski will do better than he did against Islam in the first fight because he's learned a lot and he knows not to underestimate Islam's striking. However, with the added time for rehydration, with Islam also making adjustments of his own, I think Islam's going to have an easier time taking Volk to the ground. But in the end, who do I see winning this fight? And I wish it wasn't under these circumstances for both guys. I wish Volkanovski was 100% with a full training camp, and I wish Islam had a full training camp dedicated to Alexander Volkanovski because he was originally supposed to fight Charles, a much different fighter than Volk. But in the end, I gotta go with Islam, and I'll take him by a decision. I think it'll be another fairly close decision. I think Islam will win it more convincingly this time. I think he'll have an easier time taking Volk down and then finding positions and holding positions, sort of like he did in the 4th round of their first fight. I've seen some footage of Volk training and he does look a little slower than he normally does. He's still in shape, but he's not in the best shape he could be. Volk has to travel to enemy territory on short notice. I just wish this fight happened on different circumstances, and much respect to Volk taking this fight. And if he wins this fight, it'll be one of the best wins, if not the best win in MMA history. But I just don't think he'll win. I think those takedowns are going to come easy on the feet. As Volk tries to enter into range, I think Islam will be able to catch him with that left hand. But you can never count Volk out. And I think these odds should be much closer than they are. But I'm going to have to go Islam by decision. I could see him submitting Volk. He did have a hard time in that first fight. He never even really attempted any submissions. But if he transitions to an arm bar or an arm triangle, those are two of his best submissions. I could see him getting those. I think it'll be tough. And then he could knock Volk out. If anyone's getting finished, it's probably Islam, to be honest. He could knock Volk out. It would more be a TKO with ground and pound, but Islam isn't much of a ground and pound fighter. If Islam did go out there, take Volk down, and then continuously throw ground and pound like Khabib did, I think he'd have a much easier time finding submissions. But that's just not Islam's style. Islam's much more technical with his wrestling and likes to transition between different positions. But that is my final predictions for UFC 294. It's a great card, not one you're gonna want to miss, and I'm gonna cover all of the fights after they happen, so subscribe for that if you want to. Leave your predictions for this card in the comments down below. Tell me I'm an idiot and how Volk's gonna go out there and murk Islam. I could see it happening, to be honest. I could see Volk going out there and knocking Islam out early, but it's just a tough one. Like the video if you did enjoy. Follow my brand on Instagram. Follow myself on Twitter and Instagram. All links are in the description. Sorry you heard that. My phone just went off, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Stuck in a bad dream, Hollywood rich girl stuck in my backseat, and she wanna get at me, but the day's too short, can't let her distract me.